คุณเฟรดดี้นะคะ moderator ของเราค่ะเชิญค่ะ
Yeah, good morning, everyone. Thank you. First of all, thank you to our distinguished speakers for having accepted to participate in today's panel. We are looking forward to hear your opinions in today's hybrid discussion. I would like to take this opportunity also to thank the Thai Broiler Processing and Exporters Association and the Employers Confederation of Thailand, with whom today we are co-organizing this training and of course this session. My name is Fredy Guayacan. I work for the International Labour Organization. I'm the manager of the Responsible Supply Chains in Asia program from the ILO side. The Responsible Supply Chains in Asia program is a partnership between the European Union, the International Labour Organization, and the OECD. It is funded by the European Union. The program has as an objective to promote an enabling environment for the promotion of responsible business conduct and socially responsible labor practices. The program is very much in line with the international policy instruments, such as the M&E Declaration of the International Labour Organization, the United Nations Guiding Principles on Business and Human Rights, as well as the OECD Declaration for Multinational Enterprises. Well, the program is present in 6 countries. It's present in China, in Japan, it's also in the Philippines, in Vietnam, Myanmar, and of course in Thailand. Well, as it has been mentioned already in the introductory speeches, in today's world, the promotion and implementation of socially responsible labor practices and responsible business conduct is no longer an option, but rather a requirement for businesses to operate, but also for nations to be able to attract foreign direct investment and to participate in international trade with partners, creating more jobs, wealth, and development. When it comes to investment and trade, as it was actually mentioned in the speech by His Excellency, the Ambassador of the European Union to Thailand, Thailand and the European Union have a very strong relationship. The European Union is Thailand's second largest investor and is also Thailand's 3rd largest trade partner. Sustainability, and more specifically the promotion of socially responsible labor practices and responsible business conduct, is at the core of this commercial and economic relationship between the European Union and Thailand. Both have engaged in dialogues, but also in concrete actions to make sure that the economic benefits from foreign direct investment and trade translates also into social upgrading, and therefore into sustainable development and prosperity for Thailand. Business who are participating in today's training, so mainly exporters of poultry to international markets, are well aware of the necessity to ensure labor standards in their own production and in your respective supply chains. Not only for competitiveness reasons, but also in terms of resilience in times of crisis, as the crisis we are experiencing right now with the COVID-19. Because indeed, the topic that we are going to discuss today, well, it was relevant before the current context of the pandemic, COVID-19, but it's even more relevant under the current circumstances and also in the aftermath of the crisis, because socially responsible labor practices and responsible business conduct are indeed helpful to manage risk during uncertainty and also increase resilience during the crisis, but also in the aftermath of this context that we are experiencing. There are also other factors which make this topic particularly relevant for companies. For instance, we have the rapid change due to new technologies that facilitate traceability of working conditions. We also have worldwide informed consumers and investors who have higher demands for transparency and accountability from companies. And as we'll see in the discussion, there are also emerging trends in legislation which require companies to conduct due diligence along their supply chains. In addition, the new generation of free trade agreements have sustainability provisions, including the compliance with international labor standards and with the fundamental principles and rights at work of the International Labour Organization. All these factors are influencing indeed the way how countries and businesses are promoting and implementing responsible business conduct along supply chains. Today's discussion and in general the training will focus on the challenges, the opportunities, but also on the ways to work together. And this is a very important and at the center of the training and the discussion, the partnership among the different actors present in this event. Of course, including business associations, including also employers' organizations, government institutions are key in this promotion of responsible business conduct. And of course, the companies themselves in order to advance decent work and social responsible labor practices in this sector, and therefore to make it more competitive and productive. With a panel full of influential stakeholders today, we are excited to hear from them what is all about the responsible business conduct, and also what is this potentially means for Thailand, and more specifically for the Thailand poultry supply chain. So without any further preamble, I'd like to give the floor to each of the speakers for a brief self-introduction. So I would like to start with Mr. Sourmelis.
Good morning to all. First of all, thank you very much to the International Labour Organization for organizing this event in the context of this program funded by the European Union. Thank also the Thai Broiler Association for its engagement into this event, and also the Thai authorities. My name is Petros. I'm the head of the Economic and Trade Section of the European Union Delegation here in Thailand. I just arrived from Brussels 2 months ago. I'm in charge also of trade relations with some of the neighboring countries, Myanmar, Cambodia, and Laos. And of course, I see my role as one of further enhancing the trade relationship in the European Union and Thailand. Before coming here, I was at the headquarters of the European Commission in Brussels, head of a unit which was in charge of trade relations with our eastern neighbors. Although, of course, these are very different group of countries, one common characteristic that I can see is that I also had within this group of countries a very important producer and exporter of poultry, namely Ukraine. Just as Thailand is a very important producer and exporter also of poultry. So I have had to deal with poultry already in my past capacity. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sourmelis. I would like to give the word to Kun Ukrish from the Employers Confederation of Thailand.
สวัสดีครับขออนุญาตนำเสนอเป็นภาษาอังกฤษนะครับเพราะว่ามันมีปัญหาในเรื่องเทคนิคถึงแม้ว่าผู้ฟังส่วนใหญ่เป็นคนไทยนะครับ So good morning everyone. My name is Sukrit Kanchanakert and currently I'm advisor for Employer Confederation of Thailand. And about RBC, we were encouraged by International Organization of Employers to implement MPC by communicate to the business organization in Thailand a few years ago, maybe before this project happened. And we start communicate this to our member business organization and also some related people a few years ago. And for today, the Broiler Association is also target of pilot project in Thailand. And in Thailand, actually, we have two focal points. One is the Fredy Association of Thailand. Another will be automobile and part. And today we work with the association to expand project. Let's say that this one thing, the first project in Thailand that we train the trainer to expand knowledge to employees in Thailand. Because for other, we just communicate by educate them, but haven't done train the trainer yet. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Vonkorpon. And I give the word to Mrs. Pimchanok.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm very glad to be here. My name is Pimchanok Vonkorpon, and I'm a representative from the Thai government today. I work for the Ministry of Commerce. My background is actually in trade negotiation, so I'm very familiar with Kun Lorong there. We were counterparts in Brussels. As I was posted in Brussels for 3.5 years before I came back to Bangkok. My history with the broiler and chicken has gone even beyond that. I've known Kun Kukri since I was young, and he was young also. We are still young. And the first day of my arrival at the Brussels office, there were 6 Thai exporters of chicken was waiting for me on the first day of my arrival when I got off the plane in the morning, and I went to my Office of Commercial Affairs. The chicken exporters were there waiting for me to talk to the EU. So that's how important the broiler and chicken issue is to me. But today, my other background is on negotiations, as I'm a negotiator, and sustainability issue has been the issue that is very close to my heart. I'm very keen on environment, and of course, that extends to labor and to good governance issue as well. I think the ultimate reason why I'm invited here, because currently I'm a member of the National Wage Committee for Thai Labor. So from negotiations and sustainability, now I work more closely on the labor standard and labor well-being in Thailand. Yeah, I'm very happy to be here, and thanks for the invitation from ILO and Ministry of Labor, as well as from the EU Commission.
Pimchanok, thank you very much for being here in the face-to-face modality. Well, in addition to our 3 speakers, we have also taken advantage of all this Zoom mood during the pandemic in a way. I mean, one of the positive aspects. We have today 2 guests who are joining us from Hong Kong. And then I give the floor to you, Joyce. Over to you. You are muted. Now.
Yeah, thank you, Fredy. And you can hear me well?
Yes.
Okay, so good morning, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests. It's my pleasure representing amfori to attend this very important forum today, although only virtually. My direct link to this forum's subject matter, I think I have to declare here. I'm a regular customer for purchasing Thai chicken for home cooking, so I'm a big fan. I hope my opinion won't be biased. Amfori is a non-profit organization, international business association, headquartered in Brussels since 1977. Now we have over 2,400 member companies who are members, who are buyers, retailers, and the trading companies from over 40 countries. And they purchase from around the world. Thailand is our major sourcing country in Asia. Our members' supply chain combined turnover is over 1 trillion euros per year. Currently, we have over 300 active producers, suppliers are based in Thailand. And food, beverage, and tobacco is the biggest sector we source from Thailand. So I look forward to have more discussion with you today, sharing about our buyers' expectation and how we work with producers in building a responsible supply chain. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Joyce. And also joining us from Hong Kong, we have Mr. Adrian Bahnerth from Migros. Over to you, Adrian.
Thank you, and a very good morning from Hong Kong. I'm representing Federation of Migros Cooperatives in the role of Department Head, Sustainability and Quality Assurance here in Asia. We have 2 buying offices in Hong Kong and Delhi. And we overlook a supplier portfolio of about 450 suppliers and 1,200 producers in Tier 1. The products we source go from food to hard lines, apparel, whatever you can think of, almost all. In 2019, we sourced 18,000 products in a purchase value of about $200,000. Food is still quite a small portion of that, about 35 million in 2019. Our main sourcing markets still is China and India, Thailand being number 3 for food. Migros itself is a group. Migros Group includes different companies in different areas and channels. Our main brand is still Migros, and retail is still our main business. We maintain about 600 stores in Switzerland and Switzerland exclusively. And what is special is that we started our business, and still up today is that we focus on our own main brand, the Migros brand. That's also why we still have our own industry processing units in Switzerland. So we not only source consumer goods from Asia, we also do wholesale from Asia, wholesale quantities. So this is a short introduction to Migros and my role. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Adrian and Joyce, for joining us virtually from Hong Kong. Well, we have 2 rounds of questions. I'll go for the first one, and I would like to start with Mr. Petros Sourmelis from the European Union. Well, worldwide, there has been a growing trend of emerging regulations requiring companies to conduct due diligence, either on human rights or on specific labor issues such as child labor or forced labor. Also earlier this year, in April, the EU Commissioner for Justice, Mr. Didier Reynders, announced the introduction of a legislative initiative of mandatory environmental and human rights due diligence in 2021. So I would like to pose two questions to you. The first one is if you could share with us what is the rationale behind these mandatory due diligence requirements for EU companies? And the second one is what this binding due diligence obligation mean for suppliers in Thailand who are exporting products to the European Union or seeking to have access to the EU market? Thank you.
Thank you, Fred, for the question. Now, in order to answer the question, I think I would like to perhaps a few elements and first talk about the broader context in which this initiative is envisaged. Say a few words on the preparatory work that we're currently undertaking. What are the main objectives of this initiative, and finally try to answer the question on the implications for suppliers. I'd say try because obviously we do not yet have the proposal finalized, adopted. But I would like to start by saying that this initiative doesn't come in isolation. It's has to be seen in a continuum of actions that have been taken at the level of the European Union. And that's why I think it's important to recall briefly the broader context. Now, the human rights, labor rights, environmental aspects, all the sustainability-related issues have gradually developed into central topics in the EU public debate and in EU policy making. And there is an ever-growing interest on the part both of our civil society, but also of the European Parliament and part of our member states to discuss those issues. And of course, as the value chains become more and more global, their supply chains come under more and more scrutiny in the European Union. So this trend that we have seen over the last several years is manifesting itself in different ways. And the ambassador already mentioned certain of these aspects, but I would like just briefly to recall them. So firstly, we see that trend manifesting itself through stronger and more detailed references in the EU treaty see that through the different developments of the treaty and amendments of the treaty, those references have become stronger and stronger. Secondly, we see the EU taking more and more the lead in debates in the relevant international organizations, be it OECD, be it UN, and of course the ILO. And I think today's conference is a good demonstration of that leading role that we are playing internationally. Thirdly, the sustainability is becoming really a central part of our trade policy, both in our trade agreements, and this, of course, is reflected through trade and sustainable development chapters that we are negotiating. And again, it's interesting to see that with each new FTA that we're negotiating, the TSD chapters are becoming more comprehensive, more ambitious, and when you listen to our new commission, by President Dombrovskis, who is preparing now for the trade policy review, which is a review of the objectives of the EU's trade policy. The topic of sustainability is really at the center also of this exercise. And we see it reflected not only in our negotiated agreements, but also in our autonomous measures, and notably in the GSP, the General Scheme of Preferences, which is also currently under review. So we can also expect that when this will be reviewed, the sustainability elements will also become strong. And fourthly, we see this trend manifesting itself, I think that's relevant to these discussions, through standalone legislation. And there we had, we started with legislation, horizontal reporting legislation for listed companies, so the so-called non-financial reporting directive. And then we moved to sectoral legislation. I mean, one which is also relevant in Thailand is the legislation that we have for timber, also related, if you like, to tracing the supply chains through certification mechanism. And then we moved into product-based mandatory due diligence, and the first example of that in the EU legislation is in the so-called conflict minerals legislation, which was adopted in 2017, but which will effectively enter into force for most of its part, and in particular for its mandatory parts, on the 1st of January 2021. So it's very timely from that perspective. And so, based on all these developments, if you like, one should see this new initiative that the European Commission has announced as a step further in building the trade and businesses that are sustainable from a social, environmental, and economic perspective through a horizontal corporate due diligence mechanism. Now, where are we now in the process of developing this legislation? That we are still preparing. The target is to have the Commission proposing legislation during the third quarter of 2021, but that has to be preceded by a number of steps in our system. So we have currently launched a public consultation exercise, which is running until February 2021, so everyone can make comments. Stakeholders in Thailand are also, of course, invited to comments they wish to make in the context of the public consultation. And we will then undertake an impact assessment to assess the different options that will be taken, so that we can examine them and choose one of them. And during this impact assessment, we will also commission an external study. But our colleagues in DG Justice, Director General responsible for this initiative, have already undertaken certain, I would say, preliminary studies, one on due diligence requirements through the supply chain, and one on directive duties and sustainable corporate governance. So this is also groundwork that is very useful in finalizing the proposal. Now, what are the objectives of this proposal? My third point is on that. Essentially, I would say perhaps two basic objectives, one of which is to ensure that companies operate through a long-term sustainable value creation rather than short-term benefit objective. And the second large objective that we can see there is to better align the interests of the different interested parties in the operation of a company. So, and those parties, of course, are obviously the company itself and its shareholders, but it's also the stakeholders that have an interest in activity conducted by the company and the society more generally. So, how to better align all these interests is also one of the objectives of this initiative. And the sort of elements that could be developed in such an initiative are also essentially of two types. I mean, one element relates to having business strategies developed by the companies that include sustainability risks, opportunities, and impacts. And indeed, the second one, and the one on which there is most important focus, is to have a horizontal corporate due diligence system in order to identify, prevent, and mitigate adverse human rights, social rights, health, and environmental impact. That, of course, would be one of the main focuses of the initiative. Now, this initiative should also be seen as being part of the broader policy orientation around the Green Deal, part of this policy, which I would recall is one of the two big political priorities of the Commission that started last year, how to manage the green transition, the climate, and the second one is the digital, which should be seen in the Green Deal context. And as the ambassador also indicated earlier, the current situation with the COVID crisis makes this initiative all the more relevant and important. Now, finally, what could be the implications for Thai suppliers? Again, I think it's difficult to say at this point since we are at the preparatory stage. Now, should the initiative ultimately include a due diligence system throughout the supply chains, that would, of course, mean that there would be a need to trace back the supply chains to the upstream levels, and therefore to also have due diligence on activities that take place in countries like Thailand, which are supplying countries. It could then, of course, also imply evaluating, mitigating, and taking remedial action to address any adverse impact that due diligence reports could show. Now, of course, the question again is at this stage a bit theoretical, but what I can say is that whatever the mechanism that is in the end retained in the EU's initiative, it is clear that the better the situation is on the ground with regard to respect of human and labor rights in Thailand, the easier it will be to comply with any of the conditions that could be included in the legislation. In this respect, I would also like to recall our ambassador's comments regarding the importance for Thailand to ratify the ILO conventions 98 and 87. In pure due diligence terms through the supply chain, I mean, this sector, I would say, is a sector with a relatively short supply chain. So technically, I don't think that this is a sector where due diligence would be the most complex. I mean, to compare it, for instance, to the legislation that I was mentioning at the beginning regarding conflict minerals, this is an area where you have very long 7, 8, 10-year supply chains, which are very difficult to trace back. By contrast, I would say that regarding poultry, we have a relatively short supply chain. So from that perspective, it would be easier to undertake the work. But I would conclude really by reminding that full compliance with labor standards and human rights standards is essential in this sector, as it is a sensitive sector for the European Union, which is scrutinized closely from different angles, both from an economic angle, but also from and under the economic angle, of course, we are in particular also attaching a lot of importance to the food safety and animal health issues. But we are also scrutinizing it, and our civil society is scrutinizing it from the sustainability angle, which in this case, I mean, today we're discussing labor, but in the EU, we are also looking at it from, for instance, the animal welfare aspect, which is in not today's debate, but which I want to flag because we shouldn't underestimate that this is also an issue to which we are attaching a lot of importance. I mean, this is not an issue that we are including in our as an obligation in our trade agreements, at least not in the majority of them. There are some exceptions. Take the example of, for instance, our agreement with Ukraine. There we have even annual welfare standards, which are included as an obligation for our partner to align. But normally these are not part of our obligations. But I just wanted to mention that just to illustrate once again the sensitivity of this sector and the importance of complying with the different rules. And finally, I would like to close my intervention by also pointing to the fact that the EU businesses' views, I think, have evolved in a very important manner in the last several years. And it's interesting to note in this preparatory work that our colleagues in Just are conducting that the EU business is really very, very largely supporting these due diligence efforts that they may be called to carry out. I think 70% of them have indicated in some surveys that were made that they are supporting that. So that is also a good, I think, illustration of the fact that the mindset is changing, and this is a trend that will continue. I mean, if you were to ask this question a few years ago, I'm sure that the result would have been very different, and there would be a large majority against such initiatives because they would represent, of course, additional efforts or additional costs for business. But today, it's really sort of internalized and considered as something essential. So I will finish here. Thank you very much.
Well, I'll now go to Hong Kong virtually. And the next question is for Adrian. Well, as a leading retailer in Europe, what is your expectation in terms of the labor compliance on suppliers who supply products to your company? Are expectations different according to different sizes of the companies that are suppliers? How do you think the trend of these requirements for labor standards will evolve, especially after the new European Union, but also the Swiss legislation on the due diligence after these pieces of legislation will be in place? Yeah, over to you.
Yes. Thank you very much. So, yes, Migros is the amfori member of the very first hours, actually a founding member. And we follow the amfori Code of Conduct 11 principles, which there are, just quickly, the right of freedom of association and collective bargaining, no discrimination, fair remuneration, decent working hours, occupational health and safety, no child labor, special protection for young workers, no precarious employment, no bonded labor, protection of the environment, and ethical business behavior. So we follow these 11 principles, and these are also the 11 basic expectations we have towards our suppliers. if you ask me whether there is a focus in these 11 principles, definitely there is, especially in these areas where we see that the supplier producer has full control over this area. We of course expect that it's thoroughly followed all regulations in this field. So for example, fair remuneration, decent working hours, no child labor, of course, special protection for young workers, and OHS, occupational health and safety. I mean, these are key areas. And of course, there we expect a very good performance from all our suppliers and producers. But I think it's very good to see that in this training here in today and tomorrow, you look at the more challenging areas, you know, like the right of freedom, collective bargaining, grievance mechanism, no bonded forced labor. I think these are the more challenging principles, you know, in terms of implementation. And it's great to see that you will work on these specific areas and topics. If we start a business, a new business cooperation, we always do a supply chain evaluation. And in this supply chain evaluation, we usually focus on the last production unit, manufacturing unit, and the linked subcontractors to that unit. So a focus mainly on tier 1 and also on tier 2. In Asia, since we consider most countries in Asia risk countries, we expect that the tier 1, the last production unit, actually has already a social compliance management system implemented. So this is actually the tier 1. Is quite an expectation that there already is a social audit or report in place and available. But generally, Migros follows a 3-step approach. We have basic requirements, we have minimum requirements, and on top, we have the so-called added value requirements. The basic requirements involves that the code of conduct, amfori code of conduct, is signed. And in the code of conduct, it is clearly mentioned that the entity who signs the code of conduct is also responsible to cascade the same principles and requirements in his whole supply chain. So we actually expect that in the whole supply chain, the same principles, 11 principles, are also proactively implemented by our business partner. If we talk about the minimum requirements, we talk about mainly tier 1 and tier 2, and there we expect that a social compliance management system is already implemented, or that together we implement the social compliance management system, the amfori BSCI. Added value, here we talk about environmental and organic labels or initiatives on top of the basic and minimum requirements. So this is how Migros approaches generally, you know, the social compliance implementation, and also what is our expectation. In terms of size, you know, this was the second part of the question. We use a risk-based approach, and of course, this risk-based approach also, you know, then relating to the reputation of Migros, you know, is also size of the business volume, and the size of the unit, of the factory processing unit is of course also one of the factors we look at. But this doesn't mean that there are different requirements for different size of business. It's more like a different approach because, of course, there is no one-fit-all approach. Definitely also for smaller production units, you know, we need to conduct a different approach than with big units. And also amfori BSCI, we know, addresses this situation with a small producer audit, which is different to the normal audit we follow. So I think size, yes, this is a topic, but it doesn't mean that we have different requirement. It does only means that we have a different approach. And yes, also Switzerland, same as in the EU, we have actually end of this month a big vote in Switzerland, and the Swiss population can vote over the Swiss business responsibility, business initiative. And this is also due diligence obligation for all companies under their control. So whatever we have under control, it's not defined yet what means control, but under all control, we need to do a due diligence based on the UN guiding principles on business and human rights. What is very special about this initiative and maybe this new law is that the liability, that the companies have liability for all those entities under their control, means that as victims, NGOs in foreign countries can seek redress in Switzerland under Swiss law. That's also the big discussion point at the moment, but it looks like that the Swiss people are in favor of this new law and initiative. So let's see what happens. For Migros, itself, we believe, that we are well prepared. We push our efforts with our sustainability strategy with a goal in 2025. So we expand our monitoring definitely much further to tier 2 and further down. Transparency in key categories there, we want to have full transparency beyond tier 2 into tier 3 even. We work on social working conditions on farm level. Also, we implement the Migros animal welfare principles, which based on the Swiss animal welfare principles we already have. Living wage is a topic, also a topic we joined together with amfori, and recruitment practices and migrant workers are also a topic we focus on with our strategy. So even with the new law, we see ourselves well prepared. But identifying tier 2 and tier 3 is a very known challenge. It's very challenging for us to actually know, get beyond and get knowledge of these tiers. And then of course, the implementation of standards in these tiers is a big challenge as well. So it is a big challenge, but we believe we are well prepared for it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Adrian, for taking us through the specific requirements in terms of labor that your code of conduct includes, and also sharing with us the different approach, in a way, or the fact that you have a different approach with different sizes of companies. Also remaining in the private labor governance realm, I would like to pass to our next speakers also in Hong Kong, Mrs. Joyce Chau. So Joyce, amfori has a unique position in engaging with several businesses, buyers, and also suppliers from diverse countries around the world. What is your view in terms of social performance of suppliers in countries like Thailand? Which trends do you see? And also, what challenges do you see, especially in the current context of the COVID-19? And from your point of view, if you could share with us, what could suppliers in Thailand do to improve their competitiveness at the international level from the perspective of CSR and responsible business conduct? Over to you.
Thank you, Fredy, for the questions. And indeed, actually, amfori has
if you can, yes, please.
Yeah, okay, sorry. Yeah. Amfori is a very unique in terms of driving social compliance or sustainable supply chain compared with many other associations, because we focus on not just identifying the risk through audits, but we also have a very core element that is emphasizing to encourage our members engage their producers in continuous improvement through participating of our training and workshops. So this is, and the third pillar, how we drive supply chain, responsibility, responsibility is through stakeholder engagement, like the platform today. Actually, I have been participating in many of different forums in the past decade. Since I joined the organization, I have observed there are different trends development about social performance, be it in the region or globally. So first of all, in generic terms, globally, we have seen the producers, suppliers who used to comply the requirement now become more proactive, meaning when they see gaps or say difference between different standards, many of them actually have been doing very good job in pioneering, to excel excellence. And I have the pleasure to visit one of the biggest tuna factory in Thailand last year, and they demonstrate to me really the dedicated efforts they have seen. But still there's a gap about social performance of suppliers in different countries. The same is SMEs. I think it addressed back to the questions you just raised to Adrian. Regardless of the size, actually the requirements should be the same, because workers' rights shouldn't be unequal because of the size of factories they work in. So the trends I can see is the demand of the more efforts we have to support SMEs to perform better is coming from all sides. So I hope we can work together better. And the other trend I have seen is the demand for more transparency. As you have heard from Mr. Sourmelis, we have also noticed the publishing of the results about the study by the Commission in February. So we see the trend. The intention of the Commission is making mandatory legislation on human rights and environmental due diligence becoming mandatory. So now all the efforts now we're talking about is worth to put more resources together from government or from the industry. So another trend is, if we want the social performance of suppliers in countries like Thailand, which I have to give a big compliment, because Thai government is the first in ASEAN country to embed the human rights for on business and for business and human rights in the National Action Plan announced last year. So we look forward to this kind of facilitation or government framework driving force can help suppliers to work better. And the challenges in COVID-19, we have done a survey earlier this year covering the top 10 sourcing countries, including Thailand, earlier this year in Q2. And the three common challenges faced by both the buyers and suppliers all over the world, especially in the region, because China, Asia, like Thailand, is exports oriented. So the cancellation of order because of decreasing of demand, block shipment between countries, city lockdown is a big challenge beyond business can control, and also the cash flow issue. So among these top three challenges, I think there's things amfori can do or suppliers can do. We can work together in terms of that cancellation of order. Can we work together, unite buyers together, keep the responsible purchasing practice in place during this hard time? The other challenge is actually we can see, particularly for Thailand during COVID-19, because you have a loss of, according to IOs or other statistics, we have seen maybe 2.7 million migrant workers. So during the COVID-19, we have seen people from Laos or say Myanmar or say Cambodia have to return to their country because of various reasons. So this created very tough challenges for the suppliers. Not talking about just for excelling in social performance. For survival is already a big challenge. So this is what we have observed on the ground. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Joyce, for making again an emphasis on the challenges for the compliance by small and medium enterprises, and chart mostly the enterprises which are present feeding into the lower tiers of the supply chains. But also to mention that actually the current crisis, COVID, this pandemic, is exacerbating some labor issues which already existed before. So this is something which indeed needs to be addressed in the design, but also in the implementation of upcoming policies and strategies in the aftermath of the crisis. Well, I would like to pass to Pimchanok from the Ministry of Commerce. Well, government as the main policy maker play a key role in terms of setting the enabling environment for promoting the responsible business conduct across the country, but also to transform this economic growth into social upgrading. Well, the Thai government, as it was mentioned in the opening speeches, but also emphasized by Joyce, has led different initiatives in this regard. Well, most recently, the NAP, the National Action Plan on Business and Human Rights, which is indeed a recommendation of the United Nations principles business and human rights. But there are also other initiatives such as Thailand Trust Mark and the Thailand Labor Standards. My question to you is, from your opinion, what do you think? Why do you think this topic is gaining a momentum in the Thai context? And also, if you could share with us what the government is doing to create an enabling environment for the Thai business, for them to be able to promote responsible business conduct in their operations, and also to implement international labor standards.
Thank you very much. And I'm not sure I can answer your second question entirely because I'm not from Ministry of Labor. I'm from Ministry of Trade. But I think I can share with you and the audience about the importance of sustainability and Thailand's competitiveness, which is the main question that I was asked to address. And then, of course, I will touch briefly about what we do. I think the first question. The first thing that I want to raise is that yes, I entirely share the moderator, Freddy's statement that upgrading or level up our environment, social, and labor protection is for our own good. But in Thailand, and I'm sure in many countries, we feel that these kind of efforts have been pushed upon us by external factors. Let me speak very frankly. Yeah, I always say, and I'm sure Bokong have heard me saying this. I'm a career negotiator. I don't have to be nice, but I have to say what we stand for. So my personal conviction, and I'm sure the entire Thai government, we share the importance, we recognize the importance of having good environmental protection, good labor protection, and also protection of human rights and everything. But it should be commensurate or in line with our own level of development and our internal policy. We appreciate the attention of other countries, and I think we try our best to implement and meet the expectation of our trading partners and also other governmental colleagues and also the ILO. But I still think that the main key message is that we need to do it at the level, at the pace that we are comfortable. So that would be my message there. But having said this, I must congratulate the organizer for choosing the Broiler Association, because I think the Broiler Association, I cannot, yes, it's all right. I'm just gonna skip. I will talk briefly about sustainability and competitiveness, and so just go skip. Yeah, I think I will use all of them. Sorry. I will skip the situation of Thailand export and economic situation, except for one message. During COVID, and Ms. Joyce have touched upon, food sector is definitely a potential sector in Thailand. Our major exporting items during COVID-19 has been food and lifestyle products, medical related and medical equipment products, and electronic parts. So food is having a very high growth rate of export at the moment because of demands from COVID. People stay at home, they want to eat good food, they want to have a variety of food. So during the past year where we are facing challenges from COVID, food is very promising and have great potential for Thailand in the future. So, sorry. I'm not very technology smart, right? Oops, okay. And okay, from food, which is the major sector in Thailand, coming down to poultry. Another issue I think is that poultry is very international savvy sector. You know, Thailand exports is a number 4 exporters of poultry and chicken products to the world. And I'm saying this not to gloat, but to say that because of the status or the ranking of Thai exporters in the world, they are very well aware of the trend on social and environmental movement. That I'm quite surprised at why do we have to have this session. I'm sure the chicken people, they know these things very well, but they told me that they are adding new people into the industry, so they want to talk about the trend. So my second message is that chicken is very Thailand is a major exporter, and therefore they have great exposure to international directions and movements. So they are very well aware of the things on environmental, social, and good governance issues. I'm going back, right? Okay, I'm going forward now. I will skip the labor situation and the SWOT. I'm just going to talk about why the topic of today, even though I'm saying that we want to do it the way we want it, but I'm sure that in the future competitiveness of Thai economy, we have to be aware and we have to implement the requirements to protect environment, labor, have good governance, less corruption, have human rights as far as we can. Why? Because trade in the future depends on it. Whether we like it or not, the trend towards the future is moving away from traditional trade measures like tariff or tax or even quotas. The measures that will be important for Thai exporting industries in the future are what we call the ESG, what I have to say, environmental, social, and good governance issue. And the answer to our future competitiveness is very relevant to the ESG concept, which is called the BCG, bioeconomy, circular economy, and green economy. These are the answer to our future competitiveness. I just touched briefly about this. These are the trends of the future of economic movement, development, and also in trade. We have, I will skip the protectionism or geopolitics or global value chain or even aging. I'm just focusing on social responsibility. These are the future issues that consumers want. Younger people, they are interested in environment, they're interested in where the products come from, whether it's exploitation of children, is it fair for women workers, that kind of stuff. These are the issues that the younger generation are very responsive to, and they look for evidence or something that I would tell them that the issues are very and those trends have transcended into trade issues through several ways. One, of course, is the labor issue. Second one is through trade agreement, which is Mr. Petros has talked a lot, quite a lot already. I would say that, I know that I have a limited time, that Thailand is embarking on engaging with the EU on FTA, and we are aware that there are provisions on this labor and other issues in the FTA. We are trying our best to work to upgrade our labor protection effort in the country. But negotiation is negotiation. It has to be negotiated. So we will see whether the EU would be happy with our level of protection or not. I think that is the matter to be seen, but I ask for EU indulgence that we are trying to do our best. We are very well aware that this is an important issue for you. And the other thing is that consumer is looking for this kind of thing. So I have talked about that. There are two more things that I want to say. The one challenge that I see from issue of labor and protection is similar to environment is that instead of having one standard like in product, in product standard you have an ISO standard. In social standard, there are no internationally accepted standard. Even the ILO is not uniformly adopted across the world. So adding to that, there are private sector standards from the gentleman from Migros. My first posting was in Switzerland, and I was very frustrated that I have to pay 30 something for every bag that I use, to carry my grocery back home. It was quite a lot of money at that time, in 1999. But even that time, it shows that the developed countries, they are very alert on this issue. We have to try our best to comply with that. But we don't have one standard. When you talk about standard in supermarket in the UK, in the European Union, they all have different standards. This is the thing that I, as a government representative, I think it is unfair for us. We need to be able to meet the standard of expectation, not too difficult. They should not have too many different standards. I think that's the one point that I want to talk about. And my last point is that we at the Thai government, we are doing several projects to try to meet the standard and upgrading. The Ministry of Labor have the standard. The private sector have good labor practice in answer to the IUU problem that Thailand have faced before. And in my ministry, we are promoting, we have a traceability system using blockchain. I have talked to Laurent about that. We have started with organic rice, but it can be expanded to cover issues like labor, surveillance and stuff like that. So we have tried to comply with the business expectation on this, and I hope that trading partners will appreciate our efforts. Yeah, I think those are the key messages I want to leave. Thank you.
Pimchanok, thank you very much for sharing with us. On these difficulties that many companies, especially small and medium enterprises, face with this complex landscape in terms of standards, rules, regulations, which come sometimes, many times from the private labor governance, and it actually requires some type of platform where businesses can access this type of information, and also for them to be able to comply. I'll pass next to Kun Ukrish from the Employers Confederation of Thailand, who has been very active in the responsible business conduct, not only in Thailand, but also in the region in the context of ASEAN. And I would like to ask you, what is the support that you as an employers organization provide to your members? And more specifically, to the small and medium enterprises, because the majority of your members are the small and medium enterprises which face different challenges in the implementation of responsible business conduct or social responsible labor practices due to a number of issues such as economies of scale, lack of resources, financial and human sometimes, the lack of dedication of a specific perhaps department for dealing with CSR. So what type of services you provide to your members and specifically to the small and medium enterprises? Thank you.
Before answering your question, I would reconfirm that social responsibility is important and we need to implement that. I myself realized that 20 years ago, not today or not this year, but I realized when I was human resource director in a multinational company, I faced it with code of conduct within the company. And When I was operation director, I have to prepare everything for auditing. That similar as audit for social responsibility, including audit from the buyer. So, as ECOT, I will refer to our mission. We are independent voice of employer at national and international level. We are the member of International Organization of Employers. We are member of Confederation of Asia Pacific Employers, and we are the member of ASEAN Confederation of Employers. And during this period, our president that came to the remark on the opening this morning, he was the president of ASEAN Confederation of Employers. So with this thing, we have we exist to unify the protect and interest of employers by promoting conducive business environment and good labor relation to enhance productivity, competitiveness, and sustainability of Thai employers. We also are the effective knowledge, training, and information center to employers on the labor and social issues. That's why we have to do this thing to our member organization and including the business organization in Thailand. And we work closely with ILO, Ministry of Labor, and our member, including CSO, and even with employees organization on policy making and also communication. We can communicate any new policy to our channels that use even website, training, coaching, give consultation to our employees. I can give you some example. Last year, Thai government just issued new policy on forced labor that is not in the labor law, but it is in the Human Trafficking Act. It is new actionable. Most people don't realize about it. Okay, any action about that lead to forced labor is one thing, but we have to aware about penalty because penalty is very serious and high. And most business organizations, they don't realize about this. So it's our duty to communicate and let them know. And it's one thing of international labor standard, that is forced labor. Not just only forced labor, but child labor, because Thailand has to be on watch list on child labor many years ago. And now we improve a lot. We submit a report to ILO and US about child labor. And right now, we can say that Thailand have improved a lot on child labor. And even we have target of zero child labor in these few years. Next question is about SME, I think. Yes, SME is a majority of business organization in Thailand. But one thing we have to understand them, they manage their business under pressure in order to survive, sometimes without support from organization. They quite a little bit far from the large company. But for ECOT, SME is also a business organization. We don't mind that our member will be large company or SME. We're not limited the right to be our member. And even they are not our member, they can come to see us and ask some consultation from us. And right now, we not just work for our member, we also work for organize small business organization in that. Our intention is to lift up the bar of our labor standard. I personally believe that currently we have policy about labor standard over 90% compared with the international labor standard. We might have something that we need to improve, but we are working on that. For instance, if we talk about ratifying ILO convention, maybe 87, 98, we're working on that for a couple of years. And also even ILO convention 188 that about fishing. Thailand is the first country who ratified on this convention in Asia and compare with in many regions. So that is what I believe is a standard of Thai labor will improve up to international standard. And about supporting, we have both training, coaching, giving consultation. We have even self-assessment guide that ready to give to business organization. And we already trained over 700 people who are HR and managers and related people on responsible business conduct. And we gave them the self-assessment guide to use at the tool. This is voluntary, if not forced. They can assess themselves and they can improve themselves. That is what we are doing. So in this session, I think stop. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much, Rich, to share with us what you do in terms of capacity building and also advocacy with your members for more responsible business conduct. So we'll go to the second round of questions, but because of limited time, I will have to ask to our guest speakers to be very brief. I mean, of course, we will need plenty of time to link all the dots on how, for instance, the legislation in one country in terms of social responsible labor practices, but also the codes of conduct imposed by big retailers in another country have an impact in the enterprises and then what are the roles of employers, business associations, and the government as the main policy maker. Well, unfortunately, today our panel is limited in time, but we will continue also in the context of the Responsible Supply Chains in Asia program to have these discussions and touch upon other specific topics. So my next question goes to Mr. Petros Sourmelis, and is specifically from the perspective of the European Union, how relevant is the advancement in terms of labor compliance for countries like Thailand when it comes to trade and investment between EU and Thailand?
Yes, thank you. I mean, this is very relevant and from different perspectives, and I would say that obviously fully complying with these type of standards would bring a number of benefits, of course, to the Thai products on the EU market. Now, it's relevant from, first of all, of course, from the perspective of increasing exports towards the EU. That's clear. But it's also relevant from the perspective of making Thai products more competitive internationally, as we're saying, and there were references. The EU is, of course, one area in the world which is very ambitious on setting this type of responsible business conduct schemes. It's not the only one. So progressively, gradually, the international competitiveness will depend more and more on such schemes around the world, and complying with them, of course, will make the products competitive also globally, and we touch upon that. But it's also very relevant from the perspective not only of exporting, but also from the perspective of being attractive to international investment. I mean, I don't know if this is the best example of this product, but if we enlarge the discussion and for a moment sort of think also of other sectors, and I know that the program under which this seminar is organized covers also other products, not only power sectors. And if you look at it also from being a destination which is attractive to foreign direct investment, it's extremely important. And then it is very relevant, and there again, the Director General referred to that from the perspective of possible future negotiations on an FTA between the EU and Thailand. It's clear that this is a very important topic for our stakeholders, and it's clear that any FTA that we could negotiate with Thailand, if it doesn't include an ambitious trade and stable development chapter, it will be very difficult to imagine that our member states and the European Parliament would agree to any text that the European Commission would have negotiated if it were not up to standards regarding TSD. So that's also a very relevant aspect. But the final element, which again is a bit of a repetition, but I would like to make the point, is really the perception of the European consumers. I mean, it's very relevant in order to convince the consumers to buy these products. And well, I mean, in Europe, more and more, you see that consumers are not only basing their choices on price considerations, and are basing their choices more and more on this type of sustainability aspects. So, thank you.
Thank you very much, Sourmelis, for sharing with us. I mean, this and from the perspective of the policymaker, well, you mentioned that it's now, and it has been emphasized during all the morning, and it is not an option, but it's actually a must for businesses. If you could share with us briefly, I mean, some concrete programs or strategies to work with, especially with those at the bottom of the supply chains, to promote the international labor standards and responsible business conduct.
And you say that at the bottom of the supply chain, that's difficult for me to answer. Okay, I just want to re-emphasize my clear message for today's session is that I think for the betterment of the Thai people and for the competitiveness of Thai industries, we need to understand the importance of protecting all this labor. This labor is a topic today, but also this social standard in the future, because this is the direction of the future trade lines, you know. So we have to live with it. We have to try to do it the way that it will be comfortable and suitable for Thai business, and also for the Thai economy and for the Thai people. I'm not dismissing that. I'm emphasizing that it is important. It is a must, as Fredy said, but we have to take into account our own domestic consideration too. And the second part, then this is more difficult to say. I think from the level of government policy makers, in terms of competitiveness, economic development, export promotion, we have tried to educate and keep the business sector informed of these developments in the trend for global trade, that the mega trend will means that socially responsible trade is a must. But in order to bring that or implement that concept to the labor level, I'm speaking as my experience working with the Ministry of Labor. I think first of all, I think the Ministry of Labor they work closely with the labor to make sure that laborers in Thailand they are aware of their rights, of their rights under the laws, under the regulations, and also if there's a problem that the labor they have leeway or they have access to get their matters addressed. Maybe it's not only by law, but there are several ways that if labor feels that they are not getting protection as required by their law, they can raise issues with the authority or with their employers, other than make sure that the labor knows their right and have access to dispute. Okay, let me use that word. I think the Ministry of Labor also work closely with the employers, that like we are doing today, that the employers have to know that by laws they need to grant certain protection to laborers, and also they have to comply with international expectation, and they are doing their best to try to do that. And the government part, we are trying to make sure that this kind of collaborations between the employers, employees, labor are passed on to our trading partners, to pass on to our business partners in other countries. And for me as a government representative, I make sure that our counterpart in the EU government, US government, who I'm sure the labor issue will become important to we know of developments that the Thai government and the Thai private sectors are doing together. And apart from that, I can't think of from the top of my head, but I'm sure that this issue is important for both the government and from the private sector. And we are doing our best to protect the laborers.
Thank you very much for this answer. And yeah, also for sharing the relevance that the government gives.
I'm sure the ILO knows that we are doing very well in protecting our labor.
Yeah, but there is also, support for businesses from the private sector, and I would like to just concretely ask you what are the most common requests that you receive in the Employers Confederation of Thailand from your members on these specific issues? What type of support and in which topic?
Okay. Before I answer your question, I would say that implementation of international labor standard is like a vaccine. Similar as the vaccine we waiting for COVID-19. Don't wait until you infected by the disease. If you implement it, it means that it's similar as you already have vaccination, because many things can happen on Earth like a trade. Early this year, Thailand was blamed that our labor standard is not international. So they try to give some help to us. Few months ago, even monkey, Thailand was blamed that we use monkey to collect coconut. And lastly, before election, we was cut GSP, but because also one of they said Thailand also labor standard is lower than international standard. So let us have vaccination on that. And mostly common request by our member is about knowledge and consultation on laws and some knowledge like occupational safety and health, new laws, and some consultation on implementation or activity on day-to-day working. And it's our duty not just waiting for requests, but sometimes we have to work proactive. That is to let them know in advance. That is.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I would like to ask also to Adrian, I mean, the type of support that you provide to your suppliers to become more compliant in terms of this social dimension of sustainability of labor.
Yes, thank you. For us, it's definitely a very close cooperation and partnership. It's an ongoing process of continuous improvement. There is not a start and an end to it, really. It really needs a very close collaboration, proactively driven by suppliers, producers, but as well from our side, of course. We don't have any expectation of excellency in all fields. And there's also no fits-all approach. Every unit, factory producer needs, individual solutions to certain topics and challenges. So of course, the best win-win for us is if we go for amfori BSCI, because as Joyce Chau from amfori earlier mentioned, amfori has a great series of workshops which suppliers can join and will help them to implement, successfully those social compliance management systems. From our side, from Migros side, we have our social compliance specialists which are in the field. We try to visit all our producers and factories and support them, advise them, give them support on areas of improvement. Also, we do our own consultancy on specific topics, areas, best practices, exchange, supplier workshops. We also use Quizzer, which is an online tool for workers and management to learn about social compliance rules. And also which was very successful actually in food and especially in the farm level is roundtables where several all stakeholders are involved and trying to find a good solution, a good approach fit, to this specific industry. So it's really a together approach and not only something supplier has to do. It's, as I said, the social compliance audit and report is an entry ticket, not the final destination. And I would really wish that suppliers and producers have a holistic view and approach to the implementation. I still believe I spend too much time on negotiating, audit fees instead of really working on the challenges and on how to address those challenges. The benefits, I think, are clear. In long term, work satisfaction is increased, a higher output can be achieved, better attendance, less fluctuation means less costs. I think that are some benefits out of all these topics. And last but not least, I think it builds trust. And, Migros, especially in a small market, our cake we can share is always the same size. We do not expand. So if you want the bigger size of that cake, I think you can only achieve it with trust. Means that you have an open dialogue, be very transparent about the challenges you have, and really a big, a great exchange, a close exchange between us and the producer. I think that are key points, really, which are important for a successful implementation.
If I may come in at this stage, I think I want to emphasize again that the difficulty for Thai exporters and suppliers in meeting different, regulatory expectations. So I urge that the compliance cost is very high. If the private sector doesn't get together and discuss among yourself what, maybe minimum requirement or average expectation, I think that would help greatly our business sectors. So I just want to leave that with you.
Yeah, well,
Yes.
actually, my question to Joyce next is very much on this, because several suppliers are overwhelmed with different auditing programs and also different requirements. So what can be, from your perspective as a membership organization, be the long-term solution to minimize this burden on the production?
Thank you, Fredy, for the question. And you will be amazed at how much efforts we have been spending to try to address the issue. By nature, the establishment of amfori Business Social Compliance Initiative, BSCI, now the largest global standard in fast-moving consumer goods, covering 21 sectors. Since 2003, in the past decade, our major efforts invested in this regard can summarize in 5 aspects. First of all, between standards, there are good and bad reasons why we have multiple social compliance standards coming from different economies or countries, because they have different pace of development. So we appreciate the differences, but we try to address the issues. One of the most latest example is we signed the MOU with another international organization called Social Labor Convergence Program. So it houses multiple standard body. How can we work together to eliminate duplication of audits? So like Migros, as you know, they only operate in Switzerland, but why they are so passionate to join us, so dedicated, their business may only confine in Switzerland. However, once they accept a Thai supplier supply, say poultry or other goods to their organization, that audit result on our platform will be visible to accessible to over 2,400 member companies from across over 40 countries. So we used to be very European centric. However, through our efforts of establishing a connection with multiple brands with the same code of conduct, of course, we take reference to ILO, we follow your guidance. And now we have over 100 US companies. We have over 60 companies from Australia and New Zealand. So maybe in the past, people know us only Europeans. So this is the efforts between standard body. We have developed this, say, mechanism already. Sometimes suppliers suffer from the pain of different judgment or standards of auditors. We also invested a lot of, say, efforts to calibrate.
Could you put your microphone closer?
I'm sorry. So the first one is working between different standards. So that's our nature of establishing our initiative. So that has been done, and we have achieved a lot of, say, partial or mutual recognition in some standards. But the efforts is really to eliminate duplication of audits. So if suppliers supply goods for one of our members, once their audit results is recognized, that means their results can be recognized by multiple buyers from all over the world. So that's the emphasis I want to tell you. It's not just we promote amfori BSCI and you can only follow one brand's approach. This is totally against our intention. The nature of our initiative is to eliminate duplication of audit. Now we go beyond, work with different standard body, and we have established regular dialogue with organizations like, say, ETI, like, say, SAI, like RAP, or say, SEDEX, many other standards. We try to look into the common areas we can address the gaps of different standards, and so that we can support better for continuous improvement. The second perspective is to calibrate the practice of auditors. You know, same standards, even different social auditors may have a difference when they judge, and that creates lots of confusion from the supplier side. So we also address this issue. Even within the same standard, we calibrate the auditor's practice. I'm personally participating in 4 this kind of collaborations meeting in the region, including Bangladesh, China, and Southeast Asia, covering Thailand. So in the coming 2 months. So government collaboration, I have to thank the Ministry of Commerce, because back in 2017, we got the funding from the Ministry of Commerce from Thai government, and we were commissioned to deploy a one-year program, training up over 70 suppliers for food and non-food. And that module of workshop, responsible recruitment, I'm so happy that now is embedded in different training materials, or be it government or non-government organized courses in Thailand. So we try to promote actually the law, the labor law of Thailand through our workshops too, because BSCI standard, actually the minimum requirement is to respect local law. So we work closely through different projects, and on October 28th, actually amfori BSCI, together with 44 organizations, we have issued a letter to the European Union Executive Vice President, and who is responsible for trade portfolio. We we would be happy to see the reinitiation about negotiation of a free trade agreement, mutual free trade agreement between the discussion between Thai government and the European Union. But the one core element must be social compliance and also, say, environmental performance. So we want to bridge the gap between, laws and trade and industry practice. The fourth element we try to address to help to ease the pain of suppliers facing multiple standards is we unite buyers together, and if suppliers from Thailand, you want to contribute, tell us who is not joining our initiative yet. We have a bigger power to talk to them than you alone talk to them. Why some brands still focus on investing things we have been done, have best practice, have tools for them to use already. So your contribution would be to help you to ease your pain. Tell us who are the brands who are still not joining any initiative. We will talk to them on behalf of you. And the fifth element is we support the business like suppliers through capacity building program. Last year, 2019 alone, we organized 17 sessions, face-to-face workshops, covering all the topics you have selected today, actually. On top of that, we have 4 additional ones: protection of young workers, decent working hours, how to draft a remediation. So this is the fifth element I want to emphasize here. We have been invested a lot of efforts and resources. Through this platform, I want to communicate with you. Our doors is open, especially to the Confederation of Thailand, just mentioned, the Employers Confederation, because we truly respect that local standard, and we try to bridge the gap between local standard and international standards. So, and also the Broilers Association, if members of yours like to understand more our initiative, how can we work together and build the capacity of Thai exporters? We are more than happy to do so. So I hope these 5 elements of sharing can help you to better comprehend how can we work together better. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much, Joyce, and thank you very much for the audience and the speakers. We have shared different angles to the same challenge, but also the different dimensions. I mean, it's not a straightforward topic. Then, if we take into account that there are different sectors, I mean, the complexity goes even higher. Well, I think it's clear from this discussion that socially responsible labor practices, responsible business conduct are relevant for a number of reasons. Competitiveness was mentioned, access to new markets, reputational risk, the management of reputational risk, also for the purpose of becoming more resilient and becoming more efficient. And as it was mentioned, actually, well, this morning by our director, ILO director to Thailand, Mr. Brian Buckley. Well, this is not only the business case, and it's not just because it is the good thing to do, but for a matter of principle, it's the right thing to do. So this is important, and it's also at the core that we do what we do in promoting the international labor standards, but also more specifically the labor dimension of responsible business conduct. Well, thank you very much. I think well, we don't have time for the questions because of the limited time, and we'll invite you gently for a lunch after this, and in the afternoon we will have the first session of our training, followed by tomorrow the entire day of the training of the different members of the companies of the industry and the members of the association, the Thai Broiler Association. So yeah, thank you very much for your participation, and to our distinguished speakers, thank you. Thank you, Joyce and Adrian.
Thank you.
Thank you.
ครับผม